Have you ever seen a child flapping their hands with excitement, or rocking gently back and forth, or maybe spinning in circles? And you've probably wondered, why are they doing that? For a long, long time, these kinds of repetitive behaviors were really misunderstood. But today, we're going to peel back the layers and look at the science to understand what's really going on. So let's just start by completely reframing how we look at this. This is a quote from Lena Eartharcher, an autistic author. And notice, she doesn't describe spinning as weird or purposeless. No, she calls it a routine that created a pleasurable effect. Getting this first-person perspective is absolutely key because it moves us from just being an outsider looking in to trying to understand an inside experience. And that shift is everything. All right, so what do we actually call these behaviors? Well, the clinical term is stimming, which is just short for self-stimulatory behavior. It's a really broad term that covers a whole range of actions, so let's get on the same page and look at some common examples.
Look at the variety here. We often picture the more obvious things, right? Like hand flapping or body rocking, but stimming can also be way more subtle, like twirling your hair, clicking a pen, or rubbing a smooth stone in your pocket. A lot of people do these things from time to focus, but for many autistic people, these behaviors are a much more fundamental and, essential part of their daily life.
Now, here's where the real breakthrough in understanding all this happened. It wasn't just about observing these actions, but about finally asking, what is their purpose? The whole perspective has shifted from seeing stimming as just a behavior that needs to be stopped to understanding its function, something that needs to be supported. And that is a huge, huge distinction. Look at this. The difference is just night and day. For so long, the old view was that stimming was non-purposive, literally that it was meaningless and should be stopped so a person could fit in socially. The new view? It's the complete opposite. It's now understood as a vital, functional tool that people use to regulate their senses and emotions. So what on earth caused such a massive change in thinking? Well, the real turning point, the big game changer, was in 2013. That's when the DSM-5, that's the big manual for diagnostics, got a major update. Before 2013, sensory issues weren't officially considered a core part of an autism diagnosis, but the update changed everything. It formally recognized that having atypical sensory responses is a core feature of autism. This finally validated what the autistic community had been saying for decades, and it officially connected the dots between stimming and a person's sensory needs. And that leads us right to the heart of it all, the why. Why is there a need to stim? To get it, we really have to try and step into the sensory world of an autistic person. And the key to unlocking that door is something called sensory processing. So sensory processing is basically how our brain takes in all the information from our senses, what we see, hear, feel, and makes sense of it all. For a lot of us, that process is pretty automatic. But for many autistic people, it's like the volume dial for each sense is set to a totally different level. Sometimes that volume dial is cranked way, way up. That's called hypersensitivity, and it's not just a little annoyance. Imagine the fluorescent lights in a grocery store feeling like blinding spotlights, the quiet hum of the fridge sounding like a jet engine, or the tag on your shirt feeling like it's made of sandpaper. The world can become this constant, overwhelming sensory assault. But then, on the flip side, that dial can be turned way down low. This is called hyposensitivity. In this case, a person might feel kind of disconnected from their environment, almost like they're floating. They might need really intense sensory input, like spinning fast, crashing into soft things, or getting a really tight hug, just to feel grounded and aware of their own body. And listen, this isn't just a metaphor. Research has actually measured this difference. This chart is from a study that used something called the Glasgow Sensory Questionnaire, and the results are just stark. Autistic adults, on average, scored around an 82. Non-autistic adults, around 41. That's not a small difference, it's literally double. It's a measurable, massive difference in how the world is experienced. Okay, so we've got the two big pieces of the puzzle, right? A unique sensory world on one hand, and these repetitive behaviors on the other. So now let's put them together and see how stimming works as this brilliant, built-in strategy for self-regulation. This table just breaks it down perfectly. Stimming is this incredible, two-sided tool. If a person's nervous system is totally overstimulated, say they're in a loud, chaotic room, stimming helps block out that input. Humming, for instance, creates a predictable, manageable sound that can drown out the chaos. But if their system is understimulated, stimming creates the input they need. Rocking back and forth gives them that constant sensory feedback that helps them feel present and in their body. It's an incredibly smart and adaptable tool. And I want to be super clear, this isn't just a clinical theory. When you actually listen to autistic adults, this is what they tell us. They confirm that it's a very real and effective coping mechanism. It's a way to lower anxiety, to organize their thoughts when everything feels scrambled, and to just manage the daily stress of living in a world that wasn't built for their sensory system. It's not meaningless, it's essential.
So knowing all this, what do we do? How should we as parents, caregivers, teachers, or friends respond? Well, the goal shifts completely. It moves away from trying to correct the behavior and towards supporting the underlying need. We move from correction to connection. Here are 4 really practical ways to do that. First, just observe. Put on your detective hat. Does the stimming happen more when it's loud or when there are lots of people around? Understanding the trigger is step 1. Second, rule out discomfort. Sometimes a repetitive action is the only way a non-speaking person can say, hey, my head hurts, or my tooth is killing me. Third, and this one is so important, if a stim is harmful, don't just take it away, replace it. Find a safe alternative that meets the same sensory need. And finally, create a safe space, a place where that person can stim freely and openly to regulate themselves without anyone judging them for it.
And that really brings us to the most important takeaway of all. For decades, the default question was always, how do we stop this behavior? But what if we just threw that question out the window and asked a new one? What if instead we asked, what is this behavior communicating? Because when you ask that question, everything changes. You stop seeing a problem to be fixed and you start seeing a person trying to cope. And that leads us away from correction and towards compassion, understanding, and real support.